It was Christmas Eve when my phone buzzed in the silence of the living room, the soft vibration cutting through the stillness like a warning. I was sitting by the window, the dim glow of Christmas lights twinkling on the tree, a sharp contrast to the cold ache in my chest. My name is Emily. Until that moment, I thought family meant everything, but that night I would learn how easily it could all shatter. The message was brief, almost clinical in its coldness. This year's been tough. No Christmas celebration. No explanation, no apology. Just a line that felt like a door closing, a finality that left my heart sinking. I stared at it for what seemed like an eternity, hoping for something more to follow, a call, a reason, anything to make sense of it. But nothing came. My fingers hovered over the screen, my mind racing. I could hear the laughter from the kitchen where my husband Jake was prepping dinner, completely unaware of the storm that was brewing inside me. I typed a single word, "Okay," and set the phone down on the coffee table. I stood up and walked away from the room, each step heavier than the last, my mind spinning. The house was filled with the scent of cinnamon candles and freshly wrapped presents, every corner reflecting the effort I'd put into making this Christmas feel special. And yet, none of it seemed to matter now. The time on the clock blinked back at me, an hour passing without notice. Then my phone lit up again, a notification. My mother had posted a picture on Facebook. It was the usual holiday photo. They were all there, my parents, my brother, everyone. Standing in front of the tree, beaming smiles. Even their dog, wearing a Santa hat, was part of the perfect picture. Except for me. Jake and I weren't there. I felt a wave of nausea rise up in my throat as I stared at the glowing screen, my reflection barely visible in the dark glass. I swallowed hard, but the sting was still there. It wasn't the first time I had been made to feel like an outsider. My family had a way of subtly excluding me, of making it clear I didn't quite belong in their world. My brother, Adam, had always been their golden child, the one who didn't have to struggle for their approval. He got the loans, the praise, the handouts. Meanwhile, I had spent years trying to prove myself, trying to be the responsible one, but nothing ever seemed to be enough. I stared at the picture, then at the neatly wrapped presents I had spent hours preparing. With a quiet breath, I picked them up and arranged them on the table, carefully positioning the ribbons as if somehow that would make this all less painful. I snapped a picture of the gifts, the soft glow of the tree in the background, and sent it to the family group chat with a simple message, "Refund in progress." I sat back, watching the message send, my chest heavy, the silence of the room suffocating. It wasn't until the next morning that I realised what I had done. The knocking started early, sharp and insistent, reverberating through the house. I didn't need to guess who it was. Jake glanced up from his coffee, his face unreadable. He didn't have to say a word. He knew what was coming. I got up, my feet feeling like they were stuck in cement, every step a battle. But as I reached the door, Jake stepped in front of me. "Let me," he said, his voice calm but firm. He opened the door and stood in the threshold, facing my father, who stood there with his arms crossed, his face a mask of cold disapproval. "Emily, we need to talk," my father said, his voice clipped. The words hit like a slap, and the anger I'd tried to suppress all night bubbled up, but I stayed silent. "You embarrassed your mother last night. She's been crying because of you," he continued, his voice rising now, as if I were the one to blame for the mess they had created. I couldn't hold back anymore. I glanced at Jake, who stood silently beside me, his eyes watching everything with quiet support. "This is not the time," Jake said, his voice steady. "You don't get to do this here." My father's gaze snapped to Jake, his expression hardening. "You should have taught her some respect by now," he said coldly. then turned his attention back to me. "You've changed, Emily. All this pride, all this independence. One day you'll regret treating your own family like this." My hands clenched at my sides, but I didn't speak. Instead, I just stared at him, feeling a strange calm come over me. I was done trying to prove anything to these people. Without another word, my father turned and left, disappearing into the cold morning. The crunch of his boots on the snow faded into the distance. The door clicked shut, and for the first time in years, I felt something like relief. I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel shame. I just felt empty. Empty in the way only people who have been ignored for too long can understand. As the quiet settled back into the house, Jake turned to me, his hand on my shoulder. "Are you okay?" I nodded, though my throat tightened. "I don't think I've ever been more okay," I whispered. I picked up my phone again. The messages were still coming in. My mum pleading for me to apologise, Adam calling me dramatic, and Madison, my younger sister, had sent her usual message. "You really love attention, don't you?" The words stung, but I didn't reply. My silence, I realised, was the loudest thing I could say. I set the phone down and turned away from it. It was time to stop answering. The next few days felt like a fog. The world moved on around me while I remained suspended in this strange new version of reality where I no longer cared about what anyone thought. My father's words kept echoing in my mind. "You've changed, Emily." But it wasn't until I stopped trying to please them that I realised just how much I had changed. Christmas came and went unnoticed. The texts, the calls, the desperate attempts to reach me all went unanswered. The family group chat was a cacophony of guilt trips and passive-aggressive remarks, but none of it had the power to make me care. I was done being the dutiful daughter. Jake had been my anchor, but even he noticed a change in me. I was no longer the woman who tried to fix everything, who put family above everything. I was becoming someone who was finally learning to take care of myself. One morning, after a night of restless sleep, I found a message waiting for me when I checked my phone. "Emily, we need to talk. I know you're upset, but you've gone too far this time. We're a family and you can't just shut us out. We'll be waiting for you at the house. You know where." It was from my mother, the same woman who had ignored my presence for so many years, the woman who had accepted everything from me but never given anything in return. The message sat on my screen for a while. I wasn't sure if I was ready to face them, but I knew one thing: I wasn't going to beg for their love anymore. I wasn't going to fight for a place at the table they had already marked as theirs. I turned to Jake. "They want me to come home," I said, my voice empty. Jake didn't ask for details, he just knew. He had been by my side through every family holiday, every awkward gathering, and every quiet argument. He had seen it all: the manipulation, the expectations. He had witnessed the way I had sacrificed my happiness for them, thinking it was the only way to earn their approval. "Do you want to go?" he asked, his eyes steady. For the first time, I realised that I didn't. Not in the way they wanted me to. I shook my head. "I'm done," I said, the words falling from my lips like a weight I hadn't known I was carrying. "I've spent so long trying to fix something that was never broken. It's them. It's always been them." Jake didn't say anything, just wrapped his arms around me, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was home. Not in the house I'd grown up in, but in the small space we had built together. That afternoon, the phone rang again. Unknown number. My heart skipped, but I let it go to voicemail. I didn't want to know what they had to say. Instead, I picked up my laptop and started looking into some work I had been putting off. But the voicemail icon still blinked at the corner of the screen, a reminder of everything I had left behind. I couldn't help myself. I clicked it. It was my father, The voice on the other end was cold, but there was an underlying anger that I hadn't heard before. "I hope you're happy with the mess you've made. You've ruined everything, Emily, but you won't get away with this. Your silence doesn't protect you anymore. You'll regret this." His words sent a chill through me, but they didn't sting like they used to. There was no fear anymore, just an unsettling sense of inevitability. I had already made my choice, and whatever happened next didn't matter anymore. I deleted the message. It didn't need to be part of my life anymore. The days passed in a strange sort of peace. For the first time, I wasn't scrambling to keep everything together. I spent hours reorganizing our space, getting rid of the old, unnecessary things that had been cluttering my life. Gifts from birthdays and holidays, keepsakes from family gatherings that now felt like relics of a past I was ready to leave behind. Jake was quiet during those days, but I could feel the shift in him too. He was content, settled into the new rhythm of our lives. He knew this was the right choice, even if it meant the fallout would be hard to bear. But the real storm hadn't come yet. A week later, I got a call from my work. The HR director, a woman named Helen, was asking to meet with me about an urgent issue. My heart sank as soon as I heard the words. Something was wrong. I called Jake and told him. He didn't ask questions, but I saw the concern in his eyes. The last few months had been tough. The layoffs at my company, the financial strain we had both felt. It had been a lot to handle. But this was different. At the meeting, I walked into the conference room to find Helen waiting for me with a man I didn't recognize. His suit was sharp, and his presence was cold. Too cold for someone who worked for the same company. "Emily, thank you for coming in on such short notice," Helen said, her voice tight with something I couldn't quite place. "This is Mr. Thompson from Corporate Compliance. We need to discuss a serious issue regarding last quarter's financial report." My stomach turned. This wasn't a routine check-in. I could feel the tension radiating from both of them. "Emily," Mr. Thompson began, "we've received an anonymous tip alleging that there have been discrepancies in your reports. Specifically, it seems that data was manipulated." I froze. My mind raced to the last few reports I'd worked on. Everything was logged. Everything was documented. I had followed procedure to the letter. There was no way this could be true. "We've reviewed the audit trail," he continued, his eyes narrowing slightly. "And while we're not accusing you directly, we need to suspend you temporarily until we can complete the internal review." Suspended. The word echoed in my head like a hammer falling, each syllable ringing louder than the last. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. The truth I had been desperately trying to avoid, was starting to unfold before me. How had they known about the reports? Who had leaked them? The only person who had ever seen them was my father, and in that moment I knew it had been him. The suspension hit harder than I expected. It wasn't just the loss of my position, it was the realization that I was now the target of something much bigger than I had ever imagined. I had spent my whole life trying to stay under the radar, trying to make my family proud, trying to keep everything together. Now I was thrust into the center of a storm that was about to swallow everything whole. The first few days of my suspension were filled with a surreal kind of numbness. I stayed home, my phone silenced, my laptop closed. I didn't want to face anyone, least of all my family. Jake stayed by my side, supporting me in ways that no one else ever had. I thought about what he had said to me that night we decided to stop answering their calls. "You stopped wasting your fight on people who never cared to see you." It was a bitter truth, but one I was finally starting to accept. My my parents, my brother, my sister. They had all used me in different ways, never truly seeing me for who I was, only what I could do for them. The sacrifices I had made, the money I had sent without question, the love I had given without ever asking for anything in return. It had all been currency to them, and now they had used it all up. But the storm wasn't over. It wasn't even close. The next morning, Jake and I were sitting in the kitchen, sipping our coffee in the quiet, when I received an email notification. The subject line made my stomach drop. Compliance investigation update. I hesitated before clicking on it, but when I did, the words on the screen hit harder than I ever expected. The email contained a full report of the internal audit investigation, detailing discrepancies in financial reports dating back months. It didn't take long for me to realise that the accusations were tied to a specific incident that only one person could have known about: my father. He had asked me to review some financial documents for his project months ago. I had used my work laptop to do it, my mistake, one I hadn't even considered until now. The email was a meticulously calculated hit, and the trail led straight to me. Someone had carefully constructed the evidence, and I now knew exactly who that someone was. I closed the laptop and sat back in the chair, my hands trembling. Jake was already standing by my side, his presence grounding me. "They've done this to me," I said, my voice a whisper. "It's him, Jake. It's my father. He sent that anonymous tip." Jake's eyes darkened. "Are you sure?" I nodded, my throat tight. I've always been the one to take the fall. They've never had to face the consequences of their actions. But now they're dragging me into this. I felt a wave of fury that was almost suffocating. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the way they had always used me, how they had taken everything I had to give and never once considered what it was costing me. I had been invisible in their eyes, only useful when they needed something. "I'm done being their scapegoat," I said quietly, my voice hardening. "This ends now." Jake didn't say anything. He just squeezed my hand, his support unwavering. We both knew what had to be done. Later that night, I sat at my desk, reviewing the email one more time. The detailed report included timestamps, audit trails, and even a list of the people who had reviewed the documents in question. As I read through it, my heart sank. My father had been involved in the financial manipulation, and he had used me as a pawn to cover it up. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't let this go, not anymore. I spent the next few hours compiling everything: the audit logs, the email chain, the proof that linked my father to the fraudulent activity. It was a long and grueling process, but with every click of the mouse, I felt a small sense of liberation. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was taking control. At 3 a.m, the report was finished. I attached all the necessary documentation and sent it to the compliance department, along with a formal letter outlining everything I had uncovered. As I hit send, I felt a strange sense of relief. The truth was out there now, and nothing could change that. The following day, I didn't wait for a response. I didn't need to. My father's empire, the one he had built on manipulation, control, and deceit, was crumbling. But the real shock came when I found a message waiting for me on my phone from Madison. "You need to stop this. Dad's already under enough pressure. If this goes public, it'll ruin everything. Please." I stared at the message for a long time. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't an admission of guilt. It was a plea for me to stay silent, to protect the family's reputation. But I wasn't interested in protecting them anymore. They had made their choices, and now I had to make mine. I forwarded the message to Jake, who read it quietly. He didn't say anything at first, just watched me with those knowing eyes. Finally, he spoke. "You're not doing this for them," he said softly. "You're doing this for you." For the first time in a long time, I believed him. That afternoon, I received a call from Helen at HR. Her tone was different now, more serious. Emily, we've reviewed your report. The evidence is clear. We're moving forward with a full investigation. I didn't respond immediately. I didn't need to. I could feel the change in the air, the shift in the way people were seeing me. The same people who had once judged me, dismissed me, used me, they were now realising I was no longer someone they could control. The investigation continued for weeks, and with each passing day the truth came to light. My father was placed on administrative leave. Then he was suspended. And finally the truth became undeniable. His name was removed from every board, his company's reputation shattered under the weight of his lies.
It wasn't just my father who had to face the consequences. The ripple effect spread to Madison, who had been complicit in forwarding confidential reports to external accounts. She was placed under temporary suspension. Adam, who had always played the golden child, suddenly found himself at the centre of a storm that had nothing to do with me. One evening, I received an unexpected visitor at our apartment. Aunt Denise, the only person from the family who had ever truly seen me, came by with a small package wrapped in brown paper. She didn't say much. She never had to. The warmth in her eyes spoke volumes. "Blood doesn't make family," she said softly, setting the package down on the table. "Integrity does." I smiled, a genuine smile for the first time in weeks. I opened the package to find a collection of old family photos, memories of a time before everything had fallen apart. I didn't know why she had brought them, but in that moment I felt something shift inside me. The past wasn't something I could change, but the future? That was mine to create. As the investigation into my father's actions unfolded, I realised something powerful. I wasn't defined by my family anymore. I wasn't defined by their expectations or their failures. I was defined by my own strength, my own choices. And for the first time in my life, I felt free. It wasn't the kind of freedom that came from forgiveness or reunion. It was the kind of freedom that came from release, letting go of everything that had tried to hold me down. Jake and I moved forward, building a life that was ours alone, and as the months passed, I no longer feared the calls from my family. They had all but disappeared, and in their absence, I found peace. Not the kind of peace that comes from reunion, but the kind that comes from silence. From choosing to stop bleeding for people who never learned to treat your heart with care. The storm had passed, and for the first time I felt like I was living on my own terms.